it seems only fitting that we should go through what we've already covered, right? Because I promised you would know them by the end of summer. So, number 1 is no other gods. Number 2, no graven images. And number 3, no taking the Lord's name in vain. Very good. All right, so number 4, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Now, a few of you know, a few weeks ago, I was visiting my brother who lives in North Carolina. And I was staying with him, and one day I went to get water from the fridge. You know, he has one of those fancy refrigerators that dispense water right from the door. You don't have to open anything. And I was getting my glass of water, and I noticed a button on there that said Sabbath. And it caught my attention. Because I've been spending a lot of time thinking about these 10 commandments. If you don't know, I don't just throw these together the day before. I spend time thinking about this. So weeks ago, I was thinking about the 10 commandments and ready to take this deep dive into them. So this button called Sabbath caught my attention. And it immediately reminded me of the time that I was in Israel and I experienced the Sabbath setting on the hotel elevator. How many know what I'm talking about? So this is a thing that is outside our kind of normal way of being. See, on the Sabbath, which starts at sundown on Friday and goes through sundown on Saturday, all the elevators automatically stop at every floor. So all you have to do is just wait at your floor for the elevator to come. You get on it, and then you follow it wherever you need to go, stopping at every floor in between. There's no need to push any buttons because pushing buttons would be doing work. So there's this Sabbath setting on elevators, there's Sabbath settings on refrigerators and ovens, because no creative or generative work is supposed to be done on the Sabbath. So these appliances and these elevators have these special settings that allow users to avoid the work of pushing buttons. All of this because of this 4th commandment. This commandment to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. It's unique for a couple of different reasons. First, if you've been paying attention and you know the rest of the commandments that come after this, this is the first of only 2 commandments that aren't prohibitive, right? All the other commandments have the form, no other gods, no this, no that. It's prohibitive. All the others tell us what not to do. This is a commandment that tells us what to do. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Second unique thing about this commandment is that it is the longest of the commandment. It takes up the most space. It goes into the most detail. It connects this word, this commandment, all the way back to the very beginning when God laid the foundations of heaven and earth. And the third thing that makes this commandment unique is that it begins to turn the corner from what's commonly called the first tablet of the commandments that deal with our relationship with God, turning that corner into the second tablet that deals with our relationship with others. This commandment has both in it. It bridges that gap. This commandment is all-encompassing. It's for all people and for all creation. So, what does this unique commandment have to teach us? What does this idea of Sabbath hold for us? We begin, as we have with the others, we begin with how this commandment has been narrowly construed before we try to break it open and let it break us open to a deeper understanding and a deeper communion with God. Now, I don't know about you, but I was always taught in Sunday school that this commandment was about going to church. So, gold star for all of you here. You can check off the fourth commandment. This is why we dressed up every week and we went to church. We were remembering the Sabbath day and we were keeping it holy. But remembering and keeping is about more than just getting perfect attendance at Sunday school. Remembering and keeping the Sabbath is about listening to the very heartbeat of creation. It's about coming back to the ground of our being and remembering who God created us to be, apart from all the trappings that the world would put on us. Because remembering the Sabbath is first and foremost about remembering. In this commandment, we again hear the echoes of how God first introduced this litany of holy utterances to the people. Remember, God introduced this set of commandments by saying, I am the Holy One, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. This is the one giving us these words. So in this commandment, God is calling the Israelites to remember how you were once slaves. Remember how you were mistreated and abused. Remember how I set you free from that life. 6 days. 6 days you are free to labor and to do all of your work, but the seventh day is different. The seventh day is set apart for you to rest and to remember. To keep this day as a reminder not to succumb to the drive of the empire, the drive of Pharaoh to build and to do more. Keep this day so that you do not become like those who oppressed you. Keep this day as a reminder that you are more than the work that you do. That you are more valuable than your labor, that you are worth more than what you produce. Remember and keep. This holy act of remembrance is an act of holy resistance. By calling us to cease our laboring and to set aside a day to be more than our work, God calls us to resist the power of empire that considers us and all of creation as just mere commodities to be used up until nothing is left. We fall victim. We fall victim to this mentality of empire that craves more. In lots of big and small ways, we strive to do and to be more productive, more successful, more available. This is what the empire demands of us. Its cries are insatiable. We find two small examples in questions that we ask each other all of the time. They seem innocent enough, but they both point to the problem that if we're not careful, that if we ignore this call to remember the Sabbath, then we run the risk of reducing ourselves and others to what we can produce. We miss out on the fullness of life and love that God desires for each one of us. So how does this empire mentality slip into our everyday life? Here's one example. What's one of the first things that you ask somebody when you're meeting them for the first time? Other than where are you from, what is one of the first things that you ask somebody? What do you do? What do you do? Not how do you have fun? Not how do you relax? Not what's your favorite hangout spot? Not what brings you joy? But what do you do? We define ourselves and each other by our work. I am a minister. I am a teacher, a musician, a consultant, a doctor, an engineer, a clerk, a this, a that. We are what we do. But we are so much more than that. And this indoctrination starts young, right? Just like we ask adults about what they do, what's a question that we ask kids all of the time? What do you want to be when you grow up? And we expect those same answers: doctor, lawyer, minister, teacher. These questions seem innocent enough. They are a way of showing interest in connecting with someone else. But the problem becomes when that's how we define ourselves and others. When that's how we define ourselves solely. Because that is not how God defines you. God declared you good. Not because of what you could do or how much money you could make, but simply because you are God's beloved creature. This is how God sees us. This is what Sabbath calls us back to. Creation itself wasn't complete. It wasn't finished until God rested. Sabbath calls us back to live into the perfection and the wholeness of creation, to practice a different way of being present in the world, if only for a time. And it's important to note that a day of rest, this day of Sabbath, is more than just a day off of work, right? That some of you who are retired or you're not employed, you're not necessarily on eternal Sabbath, right? Sabbath is something different. Practicing Sabbath is about being intentional in how we interact with the world and with each other. To see each other and the world and ourselves in this way that God defines us. Not by what we do, but by who we are. Every so often in the past, I used to declare a day off work as a get my life in order day. So any of you have those? Get your life in order day. And this is a day where I would take care of everything that I let slide throughout the week or the month, depending on how busy my other days off were. I would clean the bathroom while I threw in a few loads of laundry. I would pay bills. I would run errands. I would get my life in order. And it felt good. Right? It feels good to clean up the clutter and to get everything back on track and in order before facing a new week. As I learned about the practice of Sabbath, I realized it's not about switching one kind of busyness for another. Remembering the Sabbath isn't so much about getting my life in order as it is about reorienting my life altogether to a different way of being present in the world, present with others, present with God. In his meditation on the Sabbath, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Herschel famously called it a palace in time. And he went on to describe the Sabbath by saying, it's not a date, but an atmosphere. The primary awareness is one of your being within Sabbath, rather than the Sabbath being within us. Sabbath is a space that we are invited to enter to find respite and a moment of reprieve from the relentless pursuit of more. A reprieve from always seeing the world through a clock and how we can tick off each minute in the best way possible. Sabbath is a release from that gnawing ache that there's always something more to do or to become. It's not about recovering from the past week or resting up from the week ahead. It's not about stopping to analyze the past or worry about the future. It's about being fully present in the present moment. To take a breath and be. It's about taking delight in the fullness of who God has created you to be. It's about reclaiming a sense of ourselves, others, and creation at large as something more than just a commodity to be used up until nothing is left. It's about ceasing to strive for more and to be still in the promise of now. But entering this space and inhabiting this palace of time, if even for a moment, takes practice. It doesn't come easy to us. Many of you know this. You can feel it in your body right now. Just do nothing? What? How is that possible? We're not good at being in the present moment. We're fidgety and we're flighty. We're worried about what's been and what's coming. We're not good at seeing ourselves or others as God sees us. Because we're constantly comparing ourselves and judging others. We're better at sabotaging than we are at sabbatizing. In the words of the rabbi, we don't carry the Sabbath within us. And in the words of Jesus, we weren't created for it. Earlier we heard in the Gospel of Mark how Jesus answered the Pharisees that tried to correct the disciples when they saw them breaking the Sabbath by picking some ears of grain as they walked through the field. The Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. Sabbathing doesn't come easy. It is a practice, but it is also a gift. It's probably one of the hardest commandments for us to keep because it goes against how we have structured our world. It goes against this craving for more, this relentless pursuit of power and progress that the world has declared good. But along with these other commandments that we've been talking about, remembering the Sabbath and keeping it holy is about more than checking off a box of good behavior or church attendance. It's about participating in an economy of grace rather than an economy of profit. It was created for us to know and to commune with God and others on a deeper level. So, beloved of God, remember the Sabbath by resting in the grace of God. And keep the Sabbath holy by extending that grace to others. Remember that you are more than what you do. Remember that your relationship with each other and creation and yourself and your God are gifts to be enjoyed rather than commodities to be exploited. Remember and be glad. Amen.